Hey, I'm glad that you're here. In today's episode, Jai and I are talking about Working the Four Agreements. The Four Agreements is a book written by Don Miguel Ruiz, and Working the Four Agreements, for me personally, has been transformational in learning to manage my mind and emotions. We talk about in the episode how understanding the basic concepts are pretty simple, but putting them into practice takes a lot of work. I hope that whether you're new to the Four Agreements and this is an introduction to you, or you've been working them for a while, that you'll find this episode useful, and we really appreciate you being here. Hello, welcome to the Deepening Place. I'm Angela Abide, here with Jai Turk.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Jai, how are you doing?
I feel okay today. I've had a drained weekend. How about yourself?
Yeah, I had a little virus. Fortunately, it was hopefully a 24-hour one, so I'm feeling much better.
No corona.
No corona. What about you? Are you just really busy?
Yeah, I was just talking to someone a few days ago about feeling like my plate is almost over full. So this weekend I just kind of prioritized a little bit of downtime, and it was downtime, but I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be.
Yeah. When I first met you, you were doing pretty good about taking a sabbatical on Saturdays. Are you still doing that?
I'm getting back to it. I kind of got out of my routine and fell into the tendency of letting that take too long or too far to just snap back into it. So, yep, respecting my own time again.
Yeah, that's a good practice.
Indeed.
Hey, on the last episode, I did a little intro, kind of talked about how you had worked the Four Agreements when I was kind of tone deaf about, my perspective and overgeneralizing it. What did you think about that? Were you aware that you were working the Four Agreements?
Not even slightly. I thought you sounded great, making me sound great. So thank you.
It made me think that we haven't really brought that up, have we? The Four Agreements, really?
No, we really haven't, though.
I know we mentioned it once, but I thought it might be helpful to go over because they're really great tools.
I agree. Cool. Do you want me to read them?
Yeah.
All right. So here's the first one, everyone. The Four Agreements. Number 1, be impeccable with your word. Number 2, don't take anything personally. Number 3, don't make assumptions. And number 4, always do your best. I shouldn't have said numbers.
I think that you actually did read them in the order that they're presented in. That was great. The way I always look at it is, be impeccable with your word, which, can you read the definition to that?
Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love.
Does anything come up for you when you hear that?
For me, what comes up with the integrity part, to do that, you kind of do have to be careful. Not careful. See, I don't want to say the word careful. I guess what I'm saying is I resonate that being impeccable with your word kind of means working on kind of what you say, but not in sort of the over-controlled version of that we have right now.
What do you mean by the over-controlled version?
Some people say they don't want to be politically correct, so there's a lot of terminology applied to many different things now, so you can be quote-unquote politically correct, which can be taken to a level of almost censoring your word. And that makes it really hard to be impeccable with your word, or really hard to even dig down and try to get out what you're trying to say. On the swing side of things, some people, speaking with integrity, they just, I truly just hate you, and I'm getting some hate speech out. Well, that's not really great either. So what sticks out to me is it's not so much being careful; it's intentional in your words, and I think intentional in your feelings. I don't know. Maybe as we explore them, they'll kind of tie in together.
Are you saying that the challenges we're facing right now is when you try to be overly politically correct, you can't be impeccable with your word. You can't say what you need to say. And then sometimes other people take it to the other extreme and they're really honest, but they're not really telling the truth in love.
Yes. That's exactly it.
I think you're absolutely right. Those are the two extremes. And just like with anything else, it's almost like you kind of have to find that middle point and hold the tension between those two extremes. it is disturbing to me right now that political correctness is interfering with people's ability to be impeccable with their word. Almost to the point that, as a therapist, sometimes I feel like, am I really able to do my job? I have to be careful what I say, to
Mm,
not offend someone.
yes. So, do you explore that a lot?
I think most people that are coming in are ready or open, but occasionally I do have people that are resistant. One of the main jobs of a therapist is to mirror back, what you're saying. Another really important thing to me is if someone comes in and they have a really strong identity to being a victim, for example, I feel like that's one of the first things I have to help them with. And I might not tell them that right away, but one of my beliefs has always been that if you're stuck in victim mentality, you're never going to be able to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
So, regardless of what's happened to you, the goal would be to, experience that inner healing and be transformed and then become empowered so that you can go on and do the work and things that you were meant to do on the world. Right now, I do get a little concerned with people who insist on remaining there and push back against anyone who wants them to not be there.
So, this does tie perfectly into the second agreement we said don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
You're just saying that nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality. That's true. That's super true. And I think the point I heard you making in there is why this is an agreement and not like a law or a rule. Two
Mhm.
people have to agree to not take things personally. And I think that's what you were getting at in the opening of the last episode. In some way or another, you and I agreed to have that conversation and not take it personally and just speak from experience.
Right. I agree with that. I tell my couples, if everybody would work the 4 agreements, I would be out of a job
Hmm.
because they really are powerful. And so anybody in relationship, whether it's, marriage, friendship, podcast co-host or whatever, we can make the agreement to work the 4 agreements. And it just makes things so much easier if I can say, I have a different perspective. And then you can pause or I can pause and hold that space and say, okay, tell me about it. Tell me what your perspective is. I'm not going to get defensive about that. I'm going to listen. Don't take anything personally is the one that I get the biggest pushback from when I'm trying to help people learn the 4 agreements.
Hmm.
And they say, how can I not take it personally? It was obviously personal. And so my answer is just don't do it. Just don't take it personally because you can make that agreement with yourself.
We went to a teachers training on Saturday. It was an unconference on what's called cultural proficiency. And long story short, that's a long part of it. A lot of teachers don't come into the classroom with that. Students will cuss you out and say your name, but it's still not personal. And a lot of teachers have trouble dealing with that. I'd say it relates to that a lot. The more young teachers I meet, it's very apparent that everything's sort of prone to be taken personally. You're literally working with young people.
I bet because the younger people or the people who are just graduating from college or whatever, they are being conditioned in a different way that everything is personal. For you then to walk into a professional role and be told that no, you can't take that personally. I'm sure that's very challenging.
Two different worlds, I would say. I'd say a lot of ideology is probably not as apparently, or more apparently, not either true or livable in spaces like that. When to be successful at your job, like a nurse, there's nothing to be taken personally there either. I think that's another role. Any sort of healer role, social worker or whatnot. I think a lot of the word censoring. I think that's where the true masters are because they can't take anything personally.
Yeah, you have to put it more in neutral, I guess. The 4 agreements are, I always say they're very simple, but also very difficult. Maybe difficult to practice. They're very simple to maybe understand, but difficult to put in practice. But I can't think of anything that's helped me more gain control of my mind and emotions than these 4. So do you think we covered don't take anything personally?
I should read the second half of the definition just to round it out. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering.
Yeah, so that may be the why you would choose to not take anything personally.
And I think the vital words there are opinions and actions. Two things you have no influence over, and neither make anything about your world different, especially opinions. And I could get stuck there all day, to be honest. So I'm just raising that. I could get stuck on opinions all day.
What about don't make any assumptions?
Don't make assumptions. Here's the definition, everyone. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and dramas. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. That's a difficult, I think that's a very difficult topic out of these four. Maybe the hardest.
You think that would be the hardest?
Not making assumptions.
Yeah.
Just because I think that the influence of like some of your neurobiological patterns, like reactions to things as a kid, even comes up in that. Just
Yeah.
your physical reaction can make you think of something. I've learned in the consultant work I've started doing. I've noticed that more than I did in the classroom. How many assumptions are naturally baked into so much.
I guess can you say anything more about that? Like, do you have an example of an assumption or?
Yes, let's see. There's an organization I work with. There's an assumption that everyone under the age of 30 had access to like a debit card or a credit card. That's because this organization does services for young professionals, and at some of the events, they collect a small fee, $5 or $10 or even less sometimes. So they made the assumption in the plan that everyone had this access because most people in the deciding group had the access. But after the survey came back from the attendees, it was like 30 or 40% of people would have preferred to pay in cash because it was more accessible to them on the regular. And I'll notice a lot of assumptions just based on the way. It's not like a one specific assumption, but how assumptions are made seem to be in a lot of different spaces. And the general assumptions are like, oh, I experienced this, and the people around me have experienced this or experienced this. So most people like us, based on either gender or age or something, must experience this thing the same.
In our last episode, when I was just doing the apple pie America, waving the flag assumption.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, well, can I tell you about my grandfather?
Oh yeah, computer games. But yeah.
What about do your
I
best?
think it's really hard for people to access. Always do their best. As an educator, it's why I stepped out of the traditional classroom because it was really hard to even use the tools or use my time in a way that helped children even recognize what that is. So I think always do your best is an important one to me because as an educator, that's what I'm trying to bring to people more, what their best is. And getting there is a whole different story, but even seeing it, I've learned it's really blocked. America, for what it really could be, it's ironically not close to that at the individual level. So that one strikes a personal chord. Always do your best.
Can you read that definition?
Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret.
I like it because it's like grace, Like you said, if you're in a bad school situation or if you have the flu, you're not always able to perform at this same level. So to give yourself a little grace to be flexible with that, I think is important.
We had a teacher development session once, and the guy I really respected was leading it, and his name's Renford Joseph. And Renford said, went on a speech about motivation and coming to work 100%. And he says, all right, everyone, can everyone here promise to give me 100% every day? He's making everybody yell, tell me you're going to give me 100% every day. He said, everyone raise your hand, it's going to be 100% every day. And he said, 100% of you are liars. He said, everyone put their hands down. He says, there's no way any person gives 100% every day. That's just not, it's not what people do, and nothing's capable of that. He's like, a lot of days I'm at 50 or 40%. And I'm just asking everyone here to be honest about that. He's like, I want 100% of what you actually have in the tank that day. And he told this to the group of like teacher leaders. And I was like, man, that is the dopest teacher leader thing I've ever heard. And it expands obviously beyond teachers for sure. It hit me personally, man. That hit me personally. You know, my hand was definitely up. Like, yeah, I can give 100% every day. I had never even thought of that. Like, man, no, I can't. It's ridiculous.
And I think we buy into the hype, like these motivational speakers, and people start to feel bad about themselves. And there was a piece in the definition about you avoid like self-judgment when you just commit to do your best. That assessment, I think, has to be made on a day by day, sometimes moment by moment basis.
Mm, yes, moment by
So,
moment sometimes, yeah.
so just to kind of tie it all together, you are tempted to take something personally. You can return to being impeccable with your word, and that works out sometimes. So, for example, if I'm tempted to take something someone said personally, I can go back to them and say, "Hey, this morning when you said XYZ, what did you mean by that?" And then they might say, give you an explanation that makes sense, and then you're able just to let it go. And you don't have to take it personally. Or if you're tempted to make an assumption about something, maybe you need to gather a little bit more information. And that can be done also through being impeccable with your word. So I kind of look at the four agreements like a flow chart. So when I have my meditation time and I have some kind of disturbance, interior disturbance, like being mad or annoyed or irritable, if there's some upset, I want to figure out which of the four agreements I've violated. And it's usually one of them. I can realize that I felt like maybe somebody took advantage of me and I didn't say that. And then I can discern in that moment, is it worth going back? Or am I just going to decide with myself that I'm not going to allow that to happen again? So sometimes it can just be taken care of right there. But occasionally I'll realize that I need to go back and make the situation right, speak for myself, or get clarification on what they meant. And a lot of times it's not possible. So it might have been like an encounter with a clerk, say at the grocery store, and that might be why I'm upset. Maybe they were rude. Maybe I took it personally. And I have this nagging unease in me that I realized was because of that interaction. And so at that point, instead of going back up to being impeccable with my word, I have to just drop down and decide I'm going to do my best.
Nice explanation. Thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, you're
I like
welcome.
that. I like kind of walking in and out and crossing between. So that's what the journey is.
I think it's helpful to have a little guidance system sometimes to keep yourself regulated. And that's what the four agreements have done for me. So, do you want to practice?
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about your communication style and
Okay.
texting, and I know you're really, really busy. So when I send you a text sometimes, when I send you a text sometimes and you don't respond, then I'm wondering if everything's okay.
Are you asking me why I don't respond sometimes?
Yeah. So now you can be impeccable with your word and tell me about your communication style.
Oh yeah, I'm not a big texter.
So, is there a way that you're better, that you prefer to communicate, or do you like for people to just continue to text you until you get a response?
It's honestly probably, it's either, I'm not gonna say it's the latter. I think right now I have so much like scheduled people time that when I'm not in it, I'm just prone to not respond. So it's really that I don't have a good balance of it yet, which is why my having my Saturday back has been important. So like, if that makes sense. So normally, if I just have my phone and I'm not having to meet with someone or having to be somewhere, I'm just kind of ignoring it. And so the answer, I don't want to be always schedule time with me. But if I do see a text, I will read it for its information right then and there. I think that's the most honest thing that I figured out.
Okay. So I'm going to be impeccable with my word. It would mean a lot to me if you could just say, okay,
Okay.
or no, or talk to you later, TTYL, because I think I have a little part of me that starts to wonder, am I okay? Is everything okay? Did I say something wrong? Did he hate the episode?
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
Gotcha. No, that is my text style, if you must know. My siblings have a I guess like a sibling thread. In the sibling thread, I'm notoriously known as the late one to respond. But they also call me the most caring sibling. So like I was just taking it as part of my personality at this point. So, but I hear you and thank you for sharing it. And yeah, I can do that.
so that was kind of a silly little thing, but I wanted to use it just to maybe give everybody an example of how to work the four agreements. If I'm tempted to take something personally or make an assumption, I can go to the person and say, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about give me some more information basically." And so you give me information that your style of communicating through text is very lax and you notoriously don't respond to text messages. And so now and forever, I can just relax in that and not be tempted to believe that it means something more. I know that you're just not a great texter. I can just bug you or call you, or if it's an emergency, maybe I can get an emergency contact and have somebody else on the line. But like I said, that's just kind of a silly example. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but when I was even telling you, it was kind of painful to me to have to say it. And that's how being impeccable with your word is sometimes. It's almost painful to have to say it. But then once you say it and you have somebody you trust that will hold the space for you and listen and say, okay, I got what you're saying, and give you the information that you need to not take it personally. That's how solid relationships are formed. I encourage everybody to practice. And one thing that you can do too is let somebody know what you're doing. If you want to practice this, I would advise you, especially if it's somebody close, like a friend, you can tell them, hey, I want to practice the four agreements. And would it be okay if I practice being impeccable with my word? Because the thing is, if you're not doing it with someone that you trust, you might get kind of an ego backlash instead of somebody holding the space for you and saying, okay, I hear what you're saying. That's just a little warning. But I do recommend it for everybody who wants to have more peace in their life. The four agreements are a great way to work that out.
I think the communication example you used is like that short conversation is really useful. I've definitely had that in my personal relationship. I've had it in definitely different business relationships, like all sorts of relationships, but especially people you're sharing any sort of trying to share intimate space with, like you were saying, like trying to be in a trusting place. I think that sort of conversation is becoming more and more common or needed. Maybe it's not common, but it is more commonly needed.
Hey, were you a Star Trek fan at all, ever?
Medium. I used to watch it like regularly, and I think I've seen all the new movies.
Well, do you remember the one with Captain Picard?
Yeah.
Especially in that episode, it might have been in all the Star Treks. I'm not a huge fan, but I loved when somebody would come to the commander and say, "Permission to speak freely, sir," and he would say, "Permission granted." Then they could speak freely, and the person who was under him, as far as command, could say, "Look, I don't really think that the way you're handling this is correct. I just wanted to give you that opinion." And then the captain could say, okay, thank you for sharing. And then that was it. Then he was back to being captain. But to me, that's kind of what being impeccable with your word is like. It's like you're asking somebody permission to speak freely. And if they say permission granted, that means they're going to hold the space for you and allow you to say what you need to say. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. I've personally been there. Hold that space. That's what real leadership would or does look like. Like hold giving like from Captain Picard's point of view. That's what real leadership would do. We do not have that. Yeah, from what I know about like corporate structures or even the structures in school, there's no space for that. And that's like you just said, that's crucial. It's one of the first things on the list when it comes to any speaking thing, be able to say what you have to say, or at least see what you see. It's more than your opinion. being able to actually share your experience safely.
Yeah, share your experience safely. I like that. All right. Well, I think we wanted to cover the four agreements because it's really foundational to probably a lot of the other things that we'll be talking about. And I think, Jai, especially when we start inviting other people and having those more difficult conversations, I believe that we'll be inviting people to work the four agreements with us and agreeing to hold the space for each other as we talk about our perspectives that might be different. So this is just kind of laying a little groundwork. So hopefully it'll help you personally, but it might also help you to understand what we're kind of going for on the podcast when we start having some of these more difficult conversations. Thank you for joining tonight. I guess I'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Yep. Thanks for keeping it together, keeping it moving forward.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Bye bye.